Welcome to a Guide to Ninja series, episode 27, an in-depth look at TP Gearsets. So one of the most common requests I get is to release a new gearset video going over the changes that Odyssey Gear has introduced to Ninja. The truth is, it hasn't changed much in regards to best in slot, but best in slot only refers to a single thing: overall DPS. So much more should be taken into account when making a proper gear selection. So these next few videos in the series will delve into specific gear sets and what options exist for multiple angles, so that you're not just looking at the single angle of DPS. Now today we will be covering TP Gearsets. Now TP Gearsets are the set of gear you're wearing the majority of the time and what you will always return to after casting a spell or using an ability. From strictly a DPS standpoint, we are looking at only a few things in these sets. Multi-attack and store TP is the most important here, as it will lead you to executing your next weapon skill quicker. However, accuracy cannot be overlooked, as if you aren't accuracy capped, then you're going to be missing out on some damage. Now for a ninja, we need to also make sure to focus not only on accuracy, but ranged accuracy as well, due to the amount of TP we get from the Dokken effect. Now after those, attack also comes into play at increasing your white damage. This is the damage that you do during your standard attack rounds. Now often when we talk about gear sets, we need to talk about that gear set in different situations. The main two being a trust buff situation and a party buff situation. Now in the trust buff situation, you normally have standard buffs, which include you being haste capped by your trust, and Dia 3 being on the mob thanks to Koromoru or another one of your red mage trust. Note that you can further buff yourself in these situations by using trusts such as Koltada for extra attack and multi-attack. But the buffs that you will get will vary from situation to situation, as will your ability to use these extra trusts. So even though you can buff yourself a little further with trust, I don't recommend you include those in your trust buff calculations. Now, in the party buff situation, it's an entirely different buff strategy. We are assuming that we have buffs from our Red Mage, Bard, Corsair, and Geomancer. This includes Minuet, March, Chaos Roll, Samurai's Roll, Frailty, and Fury. Now this will fully cap our haste, accuracy, and attack. And this makes it so those stats on our standard gear are no longer helpful and are better replaced with other gear with better stats and attributes that are not currently capped. Now we will be discussing both of these types of setups as we go through these TP gear set differences. Now for the purposes of our discussion and comparison DPS numbers, today we'll be using the Hishi Shiroken and Gleddy's knife and using Blade Shun. Also know that currently we can only achieve rank 25 on the Odyssey gear, so when I reference the rank 30 versions later in this video, I'm speaking of the Dat Mine stats that should be unlocked later in 2022. I'll specifically mention in each instance when a piece of gear becomes more relevant than another, so that it's clear not only what is possible now, but what future upgrades should mean. So without further delay, let's go ahead and get into this. In regards to the best in slot for DPS gear set, this gear set that you see right here on the left is the traditional best in slot gear set. It includes a Date Shuriken, an Edamar head and Edamar hands on path B, Kendatsuba +1 body, Samnua tights with the fully augmented 3 double attack and 3 triple attack, Herc feet with a 4% triple attack augment, Ninja Nodowa +2 neck fully augmented, Gear and Epona's rings, Salafi belt +1, and an Andartia's mantle with store TP. Now earrings are going to be a combination of either Telos, Brutal, Seasense, and Addition, depending on the weapon and weapon skill you are using. So that's where a little bit of the gray area exists, is which earring you end up selecting depending on those options. Now that's simply the traditional best in slot gear set. These days we can quite often replace the Kendatsuba +1 body, Samnua tights, and Herc boots, all with augmented Tatnashi gear for over a 100 DPS boost. We've also been giving a new earring option in the form of the Crepuscular earring. Now it's normally not the top DPS option in regards to raw DPS, but it's usually not far behind, and its accuracy and ranged accuracy boosts can be quite helpful when making gear sets. In fact, that's what we need to talk about next, the difference between raw DPS and actual DPS. Now let's take the two gear sets that we just talked about as an example. In raw DPS, the traditional best in slot TP gear set achieves 2,693 DPS, and the Tatanashi gear 2,805, so over 100 DPS boost as I mentioned. However, that is without taking into account accuracy and ranged accuracy. Those are just raw DPS numbers. We have enough accuracy with these sets, but their lack of ranged accuracy shows as when we use it to take on level 136 Apex bats, the traditional set will now only do 2,577 DPS because of those missed ranged attacks, and the Tatanashi set with even lower ranged accuracy has now fallen below the traditional set to only 2,539 DPS. This is important as there are now other sets that would outperform these in terms of DPS and offer much more survivability. Let's first introduce those sets while we talk about where they stack up. Let's go ahead and first introduce these sets before we talk about where they stack up. First, let's introduce the two most common sets that we've had for years. My personal favorite, the Malignant set and the Kendatsuba +1 set. I'll also be showing you what the full Tatanashi set achieves, as well as the Mumu +2 set from Ambuscade, so that comparisons can be made to what I would call the starting endgame set for Ninja. Next, let's introduce the Empaka set, which I will be showing in both its unaugmented and rank 30 state. This will be followed by our hybrid set that takes the head, hands, and feet from the Malignant set and pairs them with the body and legs from the Empaka set. We compare this set on both the unaugmented and rank 30 states as well. This brings us to the Naomi set Path A. Now most won't be doing Path A as B and C hold so much more potential, but I did want to show what a set augmented on this path would achieve, so I'll be showing both rank 0 and 30 results here as well. Okay, that's going to be it for all the sets that we're going to go over. Let's now go ahead and look at our first comparison and see where they all stack up. The first comparison is comparing raw and actual DPS numbers of all the sets I just described. So these numbers that you're seeing here are the DPS achieved when fighting Apex bats with these specific gear sets. Now up top, we have our two best-in-slot gear sets that we've previously discussed, the traditional and the new Tatanashi set. Let's start our analysis here. Now as already stated, these two sets achieve the highest overall raw DPS numbers, but when ranged accuracy is taken into account, the DPS drops pretty substantially. In the Tatanashi set, we are missing 166 ranged accuracy to cap with our trust buffs, and 68 ranged accuracy in a party buff situation to cap our ranged accuracy. Now with the traditional set, you will notice that we are only deficient in our trust buff situation where we happen to be missing 84 ranged accuracy. In our party buff situation, we actually end up having enough ranged accuracy and achieve our highest overall party buffed DPS. Now that we are informed on what DPS numbers the best in slot sets make, let's compare it to the other sets I've mentioned, and I encourage you to look at the actual T and actual P columns for the actual DPS these sets would achieve in this situation. Now as you can see, the trust buff situation, we actually have two sets that will outperform these best in slot sets, and 4 others that will be within 50 DPS of those sets. In fact, if you look at the top 8 TP sets shown here, in a party setup the difference between all of these sets, the best and the worst, is only a 6% change. Looking at the actual party buffs DPS, we can see that the highest DPS is indeed still achieved with our 2 best in slot TP sets, but you will notice that we once again have 7 sets that are within 150 DPS of each other, and the difference among the top 7 sets here is only a 3% damage difference. Now I wanted to emphasize this point to show that there is not much difference between the damage output from these top sets, even though they all kind of achieve this DPS using drastically different methods. Now in my opinion, this means that pure DPS should not be the driving force in our decision on which of these gear sets to use, and instead, the other relevant stats in these sets need to be taken into account to make a decision. Before we get into that though, let's finish with our DPS chart here and discuss the DPS options in the red near the bottom. Here we have the Mumu +2 set from Ambuscade, the Empaka set at R0, and the Naomi set at R0. Now I put these here to show exactly how these sets compare to the other endgame sets. Now as you can see, with the Empaka or Naomi at this stage, you're actually going to be getting less DPS than simply going with the starting endgame gear for Ninja being the Mumu plus 2 set. I also wanted you to note that the Mumu plus 2 set is only an 18% difference in trust buff situations behind the top set, and a 12% difference in the party buff situations below that top set. Now I point this out as many feel going from a starting endgame gear to the final endgame gear will double or even more your damage output. And I really wanted to emphasize that the actual amount gained is really only a relatively small percentage overall. Make sure you keep this in mind. So in this first stage of analysis, we've identified 9 gear sets that have potential to be very close to the top in regards to overall DPS. In the next phase, we will look closely at the accuracy and attack potential of all of these sets. Now we've already seen how important accuracy and ranged accuracy can be to Ninja to make sure that we achieve our fullest potential. So we're starting there. You can see the total strength and dex that each of these sets give you, but we won't be focusing on these numbers as I've already taken them into account on our total accuracy, attack, and evasion numbers. So let's skip right to those totals. For accuracy, we can see that the Naomi A on rank 30 and the Tatnashi set are our best sets overall for accuracy. That being said though, the amount of accuracy they offer is a bit more than most situations will call for, and the hybrid rank 30, Kendatsuba plus 1, Malignance, and Empaka rank 30 gear sets should also prove to have more than enough accuracy for most situations. You will want to be mindful when using the best in slot Tatnashi set, the hybrid rank 0 set, and the Mumu plus 2 set, as they are roughly 80 accuracy, lower than our top tier here, so you may run into accuracy issues with those higher evasion targets. Now you can also see here that the traditional best in slot set as well as our rank 0 Empaka and Naomi sets have awful accuracy and are near 150 lower than our top tier. This makes those sets useful for taking on Omen and Del fodder, but you will have accuracy issues on most content higher than level 125 to 130, so you want to keep this in mind. Now let's discuss attack. Not nearly as important as accuracy in a TP set, but a high amount of attack in your TP set will lead to more overall DPS, so let's briefly look at which sets excel in attack. First, you can clearly see that the Empaka set is the clear winner here in this category, with the rank 30 version having nearly double that of the next closest non-Empaka option. The majority of the rest of the sets have similar attack numbers in that 200 to 250 range, and then we have the Kendatsuba, Malignance, and Mumu sets that have horrible attack numbers. Now the main way those sets keep up with DPS despite this lower attack is by the use of critical hit rate and increases to store TP so that you can weapon skill more often. Next, let's move on to what made that huge difference in our actual DPS numbers, ranged accuracy. This is a commonly overlooked stat on Ninja, as most don't realize just how much the Dokken effect adds to our TP gain. It's critical to your DPS and TP gain that you have capped ranged accuracy, so let's see which sets excel here. First, it's clear that there is a single clear winner here, Naomi A on rank 30, with a huge 461 ranged accuracy boost. As with accuracy though, this amount is really more than you should need in almost all situations. All the sets with ranged accuracy in the mid to high 300s should also be in a good situation to take on most endgame content. However, our best in slot TP sets, as well as the Tatnashi set and Naomi A on rank 0, all have horrible ranged accuracy. The amount of ranged accuracy on these sets is so low that you will often be having ranged accuracy issues on content higher than level 125, so please keep this in mind. Lastly, let's briefly take a look at ranged attack. This will only come into play on your Dokken throws, but does add to your overall DPS. As you can see, the Naomi set here has the most, with the Kendatsuba, Malignance, and Mumu sets once again having very low ranged attack, but attempting to make up for that with their critical hit rate boost. So based on the second stage of analysis, we can determine that of the sets we are considering, that the best in slot Tatnashi, the best in slot Traditional, the full Tatnashi, and the Empaka rank 0, as well as the Naomi rank 0, should all be eliminated from all level 130 plus endgame use from an accuracy perspective. These best in slot sets will perform well on Omen and Del fodder that is lower than that level 125, but start to fall behind and have accuracy issues beyond that point. Now in the next phase of analysis, let's move on to defensive stats, and which gear sets excel in this area. Now defensive stats are where the biggest difference between these sets exists, so we are going to spend a bit of time here going over these differences. Let's start with the hit point boost that these sets are going to give you. Here, the clear winner is Naomi A, since it gives you a 500 hit points boost, regardless of whether it's augmented or not. This is followed closely by the Kendatsuba +1 set that gives us 456 hit points. Now the rest of the sets give between 194 and 328 hit points, and notice how the Mumu, Tatnashi, and the two best in slot sets give you the lowest overall hit point boost. Now this may seem unimportant, but that 100 hit point boost can be what makes the difference between keeping you alive and you dying in a run. The lower hit point amount is yet another reason why those particular sets don't work as well as others in endgame situations. Now the agility column is already taken into account with both ranged accuracy and evasion, so this column is just here to show you the differences in totals between the sets. Next, let's move on to the ability to evade an enemy's attack. The winner here is the Malignant set, followed closely by the Naomi set, whether it's augmented or not, the Hybrid set, whether it's augmented or not, and the Empaka set, whether it's augmented or not. All of these with evasion numbers within 25 of Malignants. Now sets with lower evasion, but still decent evasion, are the Kendatsuba +1 set and the Mumu +2 set. Now just as with previous comparisons, the best in slot Tatnashi, the best in slot Traditional, and the full Tatnashi all fall far behind here with evasion numbers 200 to 300 lower than the other options. This is again further reason to not use these sets in challenging endgame content where you may have hate or be the target of an AoE ability that you wish to evade. Now our next metric for comparison is magic evasion. Once again, Malignants along with Naomi A in unaugmented and R30 states are the leaders at 674 magic evasion. Now the hybrid sets and the Kendatsuba set have decent evasion, but it's approximately 100 lower than the top tier, which will end up making a big difference on things where magic evasion is important, such as Omen bosses. Now the Empaka and Mumu +2 sets have even less magic evasion at near 250 lower than the top tier. Lastly, once again, as in previous comparisons, the best in slot sets and the full Tatnashi set have horrendous magic evasion at nearly half that of the top tier. This will make any spells cast on you very difficult to resist, and is yet another reason why I cannot suggest using these low magic evasion sets endgame. Now the next thing we will talk about is magic defense. This is a commonly overlooked stat when it comes to gear selection, but it can make a huge difference when it comes to lowering the amount of damage you take from an enemy's offensive spell. Now the king of this stat is the Empaka gear set that gives you a massive 62 points of magic defense boost regardless of whether it's augmented or not. Now the hybrid sets are second with a 41 point boost to magic defense. This is followed by the Naomi set, whether it's augmented or not, the Kendatsuba +1, and the Malignant sets, all offering boost in the +30 range. However, as with previous examples, the best in slot Tatnashi, Traditional, and full Tatnashi sets fall well behind the others. We also find the Mumu +2 set near the bottom of this particular stat. Now you always want to make sure that you cap your magic damage taken reduction with shell and damage taken gear, but once that's capped, magic defense is your best way to lower the magic damage you receive, so you want to be sure not to overlook this stat when you are playing endgame content. You want to make sure to put as much of this stat into your TP gear sets as possible. Once again though, this is lessening the reason to use those best in slot gear sets in these situations since they have such low magic defense. Next, we will move on to damage taken reductions. These cap at 50% for physical, magical, and breath damage. Now the main one that most ninjas are going to concern themselves with is magic damage, since shadows commonly block physical damage and breath damage is not commonly seen. Now Shell 5 will grant you 29% magic damage taken reduction, so what you really need to worry about is that additional 21%, and if possible, adding more damage taken reduction on to help with both reducing the physical damage you take and the breath damage. Now when it comes to damage taken reduction gear, the two clear winners is the Naomi set, both in its unaugmented and augmented form, which give you a massive 38% reduction, and Malignants, that gives you a very good 31% reduction to your damage taken. Now these sets are already capping your MDT without any additional gear, and you can easily cap or get near the cap of both your physical and breath damage taken reduction with these sets when including the 5% damage taken reduction from an Andartia's Mantle and swapping in a defending ring for an additional 10% reduction. Meanwhile, the hybrid sets only show a 15% damage taken reduction, but you should already have the 5% from the Andartia's Mantle back in that TP set, so that puts you only 1% away from capping MDT with Shell 5. That makes it so this set also works rather well. Additionally, the hybrid set we just spoke of gives you 19% physical damage reduction, so that would actually put you at a total of 39% physical damage reduction, including that Andartia's Mantle, making it so all you need to do is add a defending ring for that additional 10%, and you're mere 1% away from the physical damage taken and magical damage taken reduction caps with this hybrid set. Sadly, the rest of the sets have 0 damage taken reduction on them, making the usefulness of them in endgame content limited. Just like in all previous comparisons, other than max DPS, this makes the best in slot Tatnashi, traditional, and full Tatnashi fall far behind once again. This time joined by Mpaka in both its unaugmented and augmented state, and the Mumu Plus 2 set. Do note though that with that Mumu Plus 2 set, it does give you a 5% DT reduction. So as long as you add that Andartia's Mantle and a defending ring, you're once again only 1 away from the magic damage taken reduction cap if you choose to use that Mumu Plus 2 set. Here we are at the end of the third phase of the analysis of these sets, and we can clearly see just how far behind those best in-slot options are in regards to defensive stats. Now keep in mind that even if you're not tanking, you will most often be taking damage in the form of AoEs, and a dead man deals no damage. For our last phase of comparison, we will address all the extra stats in these gear sets to see what potential lies within. Now here in this last phase, much of this has already been accounted for in the DPS. Store TP, double attack, triple attack, and critical hit rate have all gone into determining what our total DPS is. But I thought it would be interesting to show the differences here since we know many of these sets are very close DPS-wise. Note, I'll only be covering the R30 versions as I go through this next summary. Now our best in slot Tatnashi set gets its DPS in while having a healthy amount of store TP and triple attack. It also boasts a 6% boost to your critical hit damage. Now the best in slot traditional set has a minimal amount of store TP, but makes up for it by having more triple attack than our first option and including a boost of 18% to the critical hit rate. It also boosts a 6% boost to your critical hit damage. Now the Naomi set ignores multi-attack and critical hit rate entirely and focus on the most store TP we can get in a set at 68. It also boosts your physical damage limit by a staggering 28%, further increasing its DPS potential. Now the hybrid Malignance Mpaka set has a healthy amount of store TP, mixed with a medium amount of both triple attack and critical hit rate to reach its full potential. It also boasts a physical damage limit of 17% and allows us to counter 10% of the time and adds killer effects, which intimidate the enemy, boost our damage, and reduce the damage taken by them. Now the Kendatsuba has no store TP on it at all and relies entirely on its boost from its triple attack and critical hit rate for its DPS. Now the Tatnashi set has a medium amount of store TP mixed with a high amount of triple attack and a small amount of critical hit rate to reach its numbers. It also gives you a Zanishin boost of 26, which can help you if you happen to miss your target. But with this set's already high accuracy, this is not often taken advantage of. Now Malignance is similar to Naomi in that it relies entirely on its store TP for its DPS. Now its store TP number isn't quite as high as the fully augmented Naomi, hence why its DPS numbers are slightly lower. It also has a slightly less physical damage limit boost than Naomi at 25%. Now the Mpaka set has a mixture of triple attack and critical hit rate, but it's not as much as the other sets offer, which is why its DPS potential keeps it lower on our list. That being said, it does include the counter rate of 10%, and the killer effects on this set now reach 16, which will help out a bit as well. Also note that the Subtle Blow on this set is Subtle Blow 2, so if you use a Turnian Dagger with Myoshu, That alone will cap your Subtle Blow, and with the Subtle Blow 2 from this set, allow you to reach a Subtle Blow number of 55. Now the Mumu Plus 2 set has a minimal amount of store TP and double attack, but it makes up for it with the highest critical hit rate of any set. That being said, critical hit rate doesn't really help with your TP gain, which is why this set is so low in our DPS list. And that will be it for our fourth phase of analysis. Let's go over what area certain sets have excelled in so that we can make some conclusions on when best to use these sets. First, let's start with the two best in slot sets and the Tatanashi set, as they all have similar DPS potential as well as survivability limitations. Now these sets are best used when you are killing things level 125 and less and you are not tanking. At those levels, these deficiencies in these sets shouldn't cause much concern, and you can take full advantage of the small boost to DPS that these sets offer. Now if I was going to pick one of these sets to focus on, I would go ahead and recommend the best in slot Tatanashi set, as it has the best overall DPS potential. Next, let's discuss Naomi on Path A, rank 30. Now in order to get this set, you had to forego the benefits of Path B or C and what they would have gotten you. And this set itself is very similar in the DPS and other stats to Malignance. This makes it so even though this is slightly better than the other options, it doesn't provide enough of a boost to consider not going with Path B or C, so I do not recommend you augment Path A. This brings us to the Hybrid Gear set. In its R30 form, it's right up there competing with Naomi or beating it in regards to DPS. This is the set I feel most should be working towards as the best all-around set, as it boasts so many good numbers: accuracy, attack, ranged accuracy, evasion, magic defense, damage taken. It may not be the best in all these things, but if it's not the best, it's a close second, which makes it the best all-around option for both trust and party situations DPS-wise, in my opinion. The next set we'll talk about is the Kendatsuba Plus 1. Now this was once my favorite TP gear set, but with its lower evasion numbers and no form of damage taken reduction, this set is best used these days when you are taking on mobs that can be higher than level 130 but that you are not tanking or fearful from AoEs on. Now this set's main benefit is that you can simply purchase it off the auction house, so it may serve a purpose for newer players that are working on acquiring gear from Empaka and Malignant sets, but once those sets are acquired, many find the time that they spend in this Kendatsuba set rather small. This brings us to the Malignant set, arguably my favorite set and the one you will see me in most often. Now this set is fantastic for taking on bosses in places such as Omen, where that magic evasion is so important. Now most people should find themselves swapping back and forth between this set and the hybrid set for endgame content, depending on the rank level of the Empaka gear you have and how much evasion and magic evasion are required in the event you're participating in. This brings us to the Empaka set. Once upgraded to R30, it has a good amount of DPS potential, especially in capped buff situations. It also is Ninja's best gear to tank a large number of mobs with. The evasion is a little over 30 lower than Malignance, but the addition of counter and killer effects, as well as the minus 40% to physical damage taken reduction, makes this the go-to piece when you aren't able to keep your shadows up. As long as you have the proper healing, the amount of mobs that this set will allow you to tank is quite staggering. If you haven't seen what this set can do, go take a look at the video I posted for episode 26 in the A Guide to Ninja series, showing how many Apex mobs can be tanked at one time in this set to give you an idea of the possibilities. Now our last piece of gear here is the Mumu Plus 2 set from Ambuscade, which is what I call Ninja's first endgame gear set. You'll want to use this gear set while you work on acquiring all these other pieces that I've been mentioning. Consider it your starting point for Ninja, but remember that the DPS for it isn't as bad as you would think, at only 12 to 18% below our max potential, so don't feel too bad if you're in this set for a bit of time. I hope you have found this in-depth look into TP gear sets helpful. My future videos in this series will do this type of dive into the weapon skill gear sets for Ninja to show what potential now lies there with the freshly offered gears from Odyssey. If you enjoyed this video and are new to the channel, please be sure to click the subscribe button below the video and the bell icon next to it to be notified when my future videos are released. Now as part of this video, I have fully updated the Ninja DPS spreadsheet through rank 30 Odyssey gear for people wishing to do their own analysis. You can find a link in the top pinned comment of this video to that spreadsheet. I also have a Discord channel now for people who wish to discuss things with me further, so if you have any questions in regards to this video, please be sure to join me on Discord. If you wish to support the channel, you can do so on Patreon or through the NEXTGames merch shop. Links to all of these things can be found on the NEXTGames YouTube banner. That's going to be it for this episode of A Guide to Ninja. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Stay safe and stay healthy out there. We'll see you next time.